Just make sure the stream comes up. There's a bit of delay. A little more delay. We'll start with the prayer. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Very good. Welcome to all of you. Welcome also to the many students attending this satsang online. Just make sure this is all working. Took a while for the stream to come up, but it looks okay. All right. So, as always, we will alternate between questions from our local students here in New Jersey and our online students. We have a lot of great questions again, and as always, more questions than we can answer. So if I fail to get to your question, I apologize in advance. We'll do the best we can here. First question comes from Sajid, who lives in Dubai. About the doctrine of karma, several questions. I think we'll just take one. When a group of people die in a natural calamity or an accident or an attack, I recall you mentioning that this is not necessarily due to the fructification of their own prarabdha karmas. Absolutely. And this is... Well, let me explain this and answer Sujit's question. It is a huge but common misinterpretation of the doctrine of karma to imagine that everything that happens to you happens because of your past karmas. That's very commonly understood. It's absolutely wrong. Everything happens to you not because of your past karmas. Everything happens to you because of karma. You see the difference? Karma includes both your past karmas, also includes your present karmas, and also includes the karmas of others. A little more complicated than you thought. So this is a really common misunderstanding. So we can apply. So if we understand everything happens not just because of past karma, but by the way, that becomes a doctrine of predestination, does it not? Everything that happens to you is predetermined or predestined by your karma. And we've had this discussion before where we've said that the doctrine of karma is absolutely not a doctrine of predestination. So we say past karmas plus current karmas, and not just your current, not just your actions, actions of others. So in the case of, we were talking about the war in Palestine. So last year, Israel was suddenly attacked, and 1,000 or 2,000 people died as a result of that terrible attack. So was it the karma of all those Israelis to die on October 7th? Now what a horrible thing to say. And what an inaccurate thing to say, because according to the doctrine of karma, it's not only your past karmas that determine what will happen. What about the efforts of Hamas? The karma committed by the terrorists. So you get the point. So in an act of terrorism, if someone dies as a result of an act of terrorism, it's not their personal karma. If somebody dies in an accident, it's possible that it is your past karma, depending on the situation. That certainly is possible. How about somebody who dies in a natural disaster? Earthquakes have come and taken a life of many thousands of people. Does it sound realistic to say that it was the everyone in a town dies due to an earthquake. Do you think everyone in that town had the same karma to die on that particular day? Isn't that just unlikely? So, everyone in that town made a karma in their decision to live there. It's their own karma. They chose to live there. I'm not saying it's a bad decision, but it was their choice. So their karma. Anyway, you can see the doctrine of karma is very subtle and a little complex, and usually it's understood in a very superficial way and dumbed down, so to speak, and therefore it gets misinterpreted a lot. So I'm glad Sajjad asked those questions. Next question comes from this Gulmohar Orchid Society. Some of you will remember, not really a laughing matter. Some of you will remember last week that a person representing this group, by the way, he clarifies, I presume he or she, clarifies that it's Gulmohar Orchids is a community of 180 apartments in Pune. So maybe it has nothing to do with orchids, as I wrongly assumed. Anyway, but it sounds like they have a satsang group, which is wonderful. And this person is representing the group and asking a lot of, I think, very insightful and intelligent questions. But last week, this person referenced the fact that in a class or a satsang, I don't remember where, I commented on the horrible carnage that's taking place today in Gaza. And this person wrongly assumed that since I was criticizing the war in Gaza, that I was against Israel. And I'm not against Israel. I never said I was. I never criticized. I've never criticized Israel in any lecture, nor do I feel any criticism. Well, that's another, I'll come to that in just a moment. I'm not against Israel. I'm not against Palestine, Hamas. I'm not against Iran. I'm against himsa. Simple. I'm against adharma. That's the simple truth. Okay, so with that in mind, let's see. I made reference once to a. Actually, let me try to make this short. As someone who is a sannyasi, how do you view contemporary issues like the U.S. presidential election? Yes, that's a good thing to ask. As a Vedantin, do you take a side? Or is it more like viewing these events with neutrality? Just as a side issue, there are some sannyasis who retreat from the world. They live in caves, they live in remote ashrams. And once I made a criticism, as a young man, I met a Swami outside of his cave reading a newspaper. And I criticized the Swami by saying, if they're going to live in a cave, why read a newspaper? But does that mean I feel that sannyasis shouldn't read newspapers? So if you choose to live in a cave, what's the point of bringing newspapers with you? That was my point. I read news all the time, on not newspapers, but on the internet, and I consider myself fairly well informed about world events, as much as anyone else who gets a lot of news. So I don't mean to criticize sannyasis in general as they should be completely disconnected from world affairs. I live in the same world as you do. Maybe I'm not so involved with all the activities of day-to-day life as you are, but I live in the same world, and I have the same kinds of concerns that everyone else has. So do I feel neutrality? Absolutely not. With regard to the recent election, do I feel neutrality? Absolutely not. On the other hand, I won't discuss these issues of politics for a very specific reason. And that is, among students, there are some on one side of the fence, there are some on the other side of the fence. If I express my personal views, then whoever is on the other side of the fence will feel hurt. And for that reason, my primary role is as a teacher. And if I hurt the feelings of my students, doesn't that interfere with teaching? So for that reason, I have very strong political views, but I won't voice them because it's not, for two reasons. One I just said, it will be hurtful to some students. But the second reason is, this is a Vedanta class. I'm a Vedanta teacher. I'm not a social commentator. You will notice that any and every time I make reference to world events, it's to illustrate something we're studying in Vedanta. So I'm not just making comments about what's happening in the world, but rather using world affairs to illustrate certain things that we should understand and things in these teachings of Vedanta. The question here is phrased, what is a Vedanta's response to geopolitical issues? How's that, geopolitical issues? I didn't ever think of myself as being involved. I think this question is a huge overgeneralization. Every person is different. Wouldn't that mean that Vedanta teachers are different? And followers of Vedanta are all different? Why should they all be in the same category? They're not in the same category. Some will be more involved, some will be less involved. In India, there's no shortage of sannyasis who are directly involved in politics. Personally, I don't agree with that, but I'm not going to make a big deal of it. Personally, I feel sannyasis shouldn't be directly involved, but in India, that's not uncommon. It happens, and who am I to say they shouldn't do it? Everyone. I'm not setting the rules. They have their own rules, they're guided by their conscience, they do what they do. So I think the Vedantin's response to geopolitical issues is all over the map, so to speak. The only thing that we can say in general is that someone who studies and follows and teaches Vedanta will presumably be against adharma in all situations and against himsa, harm, in all situations. So I think that at that level we can find some commonality. All right. Next question from Radhika. Radhika lives in Tiruvananthapuram. Tiruvananthapuram. All these Tamil and Malayalam words. Even Malayalam is hard for me to pronounce. But to say, Sanskrit is okay. But South Indian and North Indian languages are mostly based on Sanskrit, so I don't have so much time. But in South India, it's a different thing. Okay. So, Radhika's question regarding karma yoga. How can we do karma sincerely without thinking of the results? For example, I am a doctor. Radhika is a doctor. How can I treat my patients without desiring that they be cured by my treatment? So there's an agenda She's doing the karma of treating patients, and she has an expectation. They should get better. And she counters, but if I don't care for my patient, if I administer the treatment and without caring about the result, then I can't be a good doctor who does the best for her patient. Everything that's said here is absolutely true, except for the opening statement. How can we do a karma sincerely without thinking of its results? We just talked about the doctrine of karma being oversimplified and understood superficially and understood incorrectly. The same is true about karma yoga. And one of the things you've heard about karma yoga is you should act without expecting any results. This is a term used in English many, many times, to act without expecting results. If you study the Bhagavad Gita, you will discover that Sri Krishna never, ever says that. And anyone who really understands karma yoga will never, ever say to act without expecting results, because only an only an idiot would act without expecting any results. The example I've given before is if my car has a dead battery, and I go to my car with my keys and try to start it, I would be starting it I would be trying to start it without expecting any results, because I know it has a dead battery. Does that make any sense? Who would do that? The point I'm making is this is a common but silly interpretation of the doctrine of karma. So it's a misinterpretation, actually, of the word nishkama. Nishkama karma means a karma, an action, which is nishkama, without desire. And if you study Bhagavad Gita properly, you'll discover that what Sri Krishna means is, if you are not yet enlightened, won't you naturally have desires? Right? After all, karma yoga is sadhana, which means it's for unenlightened people. If you are enlightened, perhaps you won't have any desires, but if you're not yet enlightened, you will naturally have desires. So then what does nishkama mean? Technically, if you give a very narrow definition of nishkama karma, only an enlightened person can do nishkama karma. But then how is that sadhana? It can't possibly be sadhana. Therefore, we have to understand nishkama karma properly. And nishkama karma means you are acting not for the immediate results of your actions, but for a greater purpose. And what I mean by greater purpose is enlightenment. And this is what Sri Krishna teaches in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, to fix your mind on me, he says. Fix your mind on me means when you go to work, you expect a paycheck, but you go to work for a bigger purpose. As part of your lifestyle, you have to maintain yourself, maintain your family, do everything, fulfill your responsibilities, all of that as part of your life of spiritual growth, in which case you should be thinking about Sri Krishna. So a karma yogi is one who has shifted their perspective on life in this way. To fulfill individual desires will never culminate in perfect peace and contentment. Only seeking, in the context of Bhagavad Gita, only seeking Sri Krishna will culminate in that perfect peace and contentment. Gaining enlightenment will culminate in that perfect peace and enlightenment. If you don't go to work, you're going to have lots of problems which are going to make it harder for you to perform sadhana and gain enlightenment. So you fulfill your responsibilities as part of your life of spiritual growth. So, by the way, karma yoga is a huge topic, lots of subtle insights which generally aren't understood. What I would suggest for Radhika and any of you who aren't clear about what is karma yoga and how it works, I took all these questions and answered them in one video called The Secret of Karma Yoga. I highly, highly advise, watch that video. I think all of your questions about karma yoga will be answered, and it's all based on Bhagavad Gita. Okay, one more question here. This is a question from Patrick. Patrick lives in Grand Junction, Colorado. They just had snow up in the mountains, a blizzard in the mountains in Colorado. I don't think we're here in New Jersey, we're not ready for that at all. Okay, but it's coming. All right. Patrick asks, how to understand this? How do I back up? Patrick writes, I have come to understand that everything in the world exists and occurs in one way or the other as a manifestation of Ishvara, as a manifestation of Ishvara's intelligence, according to Ishvara's order, to use my guru's expression. Patrick continues, one area that I struggle with is understanding how adharma, ignorance and suffering, can also be manifestations of Ishvara. This is a common confusion. By the way, this is a huge confusion outside of Hinduism. In Hinduism, we can answer this fairly well. I'll come to the answer in just a moment. But for our many Christian friends, God is good. How does a good God allow children to be born with deformities? They can't, there's no good answer to that question. They struggle and struggle and struggle with that. In the Hindu tradition, we don't have that particular problem, in part due to the doctrine of karma, which we talked about before. But here's the broader idea. Ishvara created the world. Did Ishvara create a natural world or an unnatural world? Pretty obvious. So in a natural world, do plants and trees die? In a natural world, do human beings die? In a natural world, do human beings get diseases? In a natural world, are some babies born with congenital problems? In a natural world, do some people, due to ignorance, commit sins and acts of violence? That's nature. We call it human nature. Human nature is highly flawed. Human nature includes incredible greatness. But human nature, we talk about the extremes. So human nature spans the extreme from extraordinary generosity and kindness and love for all to the opposite extreme of someone who's pathologically involved in causing harm. The human experience, human nature includes all of that. So Ishvara created a natural world. Fortunately, one feature of that natural world is free will. We are all empowered with free will. Using that free will, we can choose to follow dharma. We can also choose to help others follow dharma. And in this way, we can improve the quality of the world. I hope that answers Patrick's question. Do we have any questions here? Okay, maybe we'll start in back here.
Thank you, Swami. Sorry. I want to keep a circle back to the karma question that we had in the beginning and the following questions. Just to put in context, and please correct me if I have a wrong concept of something. We don't have control of the results. We can, in the best, strive to achieve something, but the results is out of our control.
Correct.
Caught my attention what you mentioned about the karma that we experience is not only our own karma, but you mentioned we have our own karma, there's someone else's karma, right?
Which can affect us.
And the background for my question is from my experience as a psychoanalyst, where a lot of the people that I work with, they victimize themselves. They put themselves in a position where they are always victim of what's happening around them.
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, and according to what you said, they can also now say that, okay, it's not me. And I want to understand, because from my point of view, the karma that we suffer is our own karma, in the sense that we make decisions all the time. Even if I'm in a place where there's a natural disaster, I made a decision to be there. Of course, I mean, it's out of my control. Maybe it's an accident. Or if I took a ride with someone
yes.
and I died in a...
Let me interrupt you, because isn't it also true that we can be the victim of somebody else's action? Is also true. So with that in mind, go ahead and what is your question now?
It was that. It's about the karma empowering the person, the current karma, not past karmas, but how much is, or if we can say that it's very important to be self-responsible by the decisions we make every moment, because they have consequences, and we have free will to decide who we want to be with, where we want to be, and what's going to happen. The decisions we're taking, they will cause.
Can I ask you, formulate a simple question?
The question is, how much is our own decisions, or are we victims of the environment?
Yeah, and that's helpful to be a little bit more clear. To what extent are we in charge of our lives? And the answer is, it varies a great deal from one person to another. So it depends on your situation. If you are incarcerated, if you're in jail, you don't have much agency. I mean, you still have some, there are many things you can choose to do or not do, but compare someone who's in jail to those of you attending this satsang right now. There's a huge range of agency. So there's no simple answer to your question. Now, many people, you made a nice reference, many people feel victimized, and some people who feel victimized get deeply depressed, and people who are deeply depressed tend not to be driven by their own will. They surrender their own will, which is unhealthy. So the problem there is not being victimized by others. Of course, being victimized by others is certainly a problem, but the problem is depression, which needs to be treated so that they can be empowered through their free will to act on their own regards, to act for their own benefit. So it's really complicated, and questions like this, by the way, are best explored by using a particular example. So I would invite you, next time you come with a specific example, and it'll be much more effective to discuss. But to finish this question in a general sense, put it like this. Whatever situation we are in today is due to thousands of factors. One factor is the karmas you were born with. Another factor is everything that you have done with your free will throughout your life. Another factor is what other people have done to you. All of those factors contribute to the situation in which you find yourself right now. And notice, we have no control whatsoever over the past. This is what it is. And we are subjected to the present moment, and we have no choice. Whatever is happening right now is happening for thousands of reasons, and right now, we can't change any of the past. You see where this is going. And that is, even though we are helpless to do anything about the past, we have free will in the present moment, and regardless of however we got to this situation, we have free will now to respond to this situation in whatever way is best, or that we judge to be best. So no matter how horrible our situation is, we can use that situation to our benefit. There are many examples of great people, Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Sri Aurobindo, and others. If you're asked, think about this is just a funny test. What do these three great people have in common? Mahatma Gandhi, Sri Aurobindo, and who did I say? Mahatma Gandhi. Oh, Nelson Mandela. What do they have in common? They were all in jail for a long time. And they used their time in jail to their own benefit. Gandhi and Mandela got a law degree while he was in jail, which allowed him then to guide his country when he was finally... Anyway, you get my point. So if you say they were all in jail for wrong reasons, which is true in each of their cases, they were all unfairly put in jail, but they didn't just sit in jail and say, oh, poor me, yeah, that kind of thing. They used their will and made use of that time in a way that was beneficial to them. So that's the bottom line of this whole discussion. Wherever we find ourselves today is a result of thousands of factors, and many of which we'll never understand, right? Life is complicated. But fortunately, you don't have to understand it. All you need to do is see the best direction to take tomorrow and to set yourself off in that direction. Okay, there was another question right here.
Namaste, Swamiji. My question is on the word smriti rupa in the definition of adhyasa. It is understandable from the point of view of the drishtanta that I know silver when I mistake the shell, and I know a snake from my memory when I mistake a rope. But how do we understand it in the context of the world? For the drishtanta, smriti rupa is in the context of... I'm just trying to understand, because the
So you're referring to the adhyasa bhasha, which you're studying. Yes. That's not about the world. It's about you. So don't try to make it into a drishtanta. It's not.
But the definition of adhyasa says smriti rupa, in the sense that what you mistake one for another has its root in what you recollect from your memory. Smriti rupa is because you are retrieving the silver or the snake from your own experience. Because if I never experienced a snake, I would never fear the rope.
Okay, this is actually this is a very complicated topic. I request you to look up Kyativada. You will find 5 different theories of error. And after studying this Kyativada thoroughly, you'll regret having asked this question. Because it breaks your head. And let me just try to formulate very briefly. This is where This is where Vedanta gets horribly complex when we explore the nature of ignorance. So mostly Vedanta explores the nature of your true nature as Satchidananda Atma. No problem. But Vedanta has to also understand the nature of ignorance. And so there are texts like what you're studying right now, exploring the nature of ignorance. And the moment you start studying ignorance, you're getting into a mess. Shankara deals with it. Everyone deals with it. But they deal with it in conceptual ways. 5 different theories of error, of which Shankara follows one of them. And I was going to illustrate it, but it's so complicated. The reference, I'll just, as briefly as I can, just hint at the complexity of this. You mistake a rope for a snake because you've seen snakes before. If you've never seen a snake before, can you superimpose a snake on a rope? No. Okay, smriti rupa. So here's the problem. When you're born, do you know what it's like to be a jiva? So then, if an infant doesn't know anything, so then how do you superimpose jivatva on Satchidananda Atma? You see the problem we're leaning towards? It's nasty. Nasty in a sense that a lot of logic gets involved, and logic, to me, is head-breaking. And finally speaking, just to wrap up this question, finally speaking, an analysis of ignorance is not going to solve the problem. Discovery of your true nature will solve the problem. So sometimes Vedanta includes some very, very deep philosophical analysis, and this is one of the areas. Again, study 5 kyatis and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But when we study Advaita Vedanta, my feeling and my recommendation is to be fairly selective in what we're studying. There's a lot of heavy philosophy in Advaita Vedanta which is not necessarily helpful, unless you're going to be teaching this in a college classroom, in which case it would be highly useful. But other than that, it may not be useful. Okay, we'll take one more question in back here, and then we'll take some other questions online.
Swamiji, my question is about the bliss or ananda. To me, it feels like ananda is not happiness or extreme happiness. In other words, it's actually emotion-free state. Am I right or wrong?
So when we use the word ananda to refer to Atma, when we say Atma is Satchit Ananda, is Atma a feeling of bliss? Atma is the one who knows the feeling of bliss, right? Okay, step 1. Is Atma an emotion? You suggested that it was an emotion.
No, emotion-free state.
Okay, and then good, that'll come. So Atma cannot be an emotion of whatever, love or vastness or whatever. So Atma is that by which these feelings are known. Then you said Atma is an emotion-free state. The problem there is Atma is not a state. Atma is that which reveals emotions. Emotions belong to your mind. If you want to say, does Atma have emotions? If you're not yet enlightened, yes. If you're not enlightened, Atma is you. Do you have emotions? Yeah. So for an unenlightened person, Atma seems to have emotions. Atma seems to have thoughts. Atma seems to do this and that and the other thing. All of that is the experience of an unenlightened person. Of course, with the help of these teachings, we come to understand that Atma is unchanging consciousness. Your true nature, your essential nature, is unchanging consciousness. Did I address the question?
Yes, so that's what ananda is also.
Ananda is your true nature. Ananda is your true nature as unchanging consciousness, and ananda therefore cannot mean an experience of bliss, but what ananda refers to is the fact that your true nature as unchanging consciousness can never be harmed, can never undergo suffering, can never be reduced in any way whatsoever, remains boundaryless, full, vast, complete. All of that is suggested by the word ananda. Is that okay? Okay, let's take some more questions online here. Next question from Arun, who lives in Bangalore. I have seen sannyasis from different sampradayas, spiritual groups, carry a long wooden stick with a piece of cloth fastened at its end. Many times you see a picture of Shankaracharya with his danda, it's called, and at the top of that danda, perhaps is a orange flag. Those of you who have seen traditional swamis ordained in the Madhva Sampradaya, they carry a stick. Actually, it's a little bit misleading. You don't see the stick because it's covered in orange fabric. Inside that orange fabric is not a stick, 3 sticks are inside that orange covering. All of this is part of these dandas are associated with 2 ways. One is they're sometimes associated with rituals, but here's the problem. If these dandas are only associated with rituals, sannyasis are not supposed to do any rituals at all. That's the idea, is that through the act of renunciation, you become free from the religious responsibility to do certain rituals. So the sannyasi, really speaking, should not do any rituals. Some people will explain that these dandas are associated with certain rituals, but that's actually a problematic definition. They might be in some sampradayas. I don't know what everyone does. So I don't know, for example, if the madhvas perform any rituals with those dandas. I don't know. I've never researched that. What I do know is that every sampradaya has certain symbols associated with it. First of all the sannyasis are associated with this ochre cloth. It's a cloth, usually it's a color associated with fire, and fire has several symbolic meanings: the fire of purification, the fire that burns away ignorance, fire the source of light, representing knowledge. So this color has a lot of symbolism with it, associated with it. And similarly, someone who is in certain sampradayas might wear different malas, Rudraksha beads associated with Shiva, Tulsi beads associated with Lord Vishnu. So all of these are symbols. Followers, especially in the Madhva tradition, I think they will mark their bodies are marked in different ways. So followers of sannyasis in Shankara's tradition, maybe 3 lines of ash, not just here, but here, and everywhere else. Other traditions will have a different nama or a different markings on the body, even tattoos of a conch and a discus and all of this stuff. These are all symbols associated with different sampradayas, and there's a wide range. Okay, next question from Krishna from Boston. My question regarding doership. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna dispels the sense of doership by saying, in the verse he refers to, good, here he actually quotes the verse, Na kartaratvam na karmani lokasya srijate prabhuhu na karma pala samyogam subhavastu pravarta. Actually, it's part of a bigger question. Before that, Sri Krishna says, Na kinchit karomiti. He says, I don't do anything at all. So then, where is doership? And I'm sorry, I need to focus a little bit more. The question is rather far-ranging, so let me try to distill the question here. Can you clarify what does doing mean? When you do something, why do you do what you do? There's a reason, right? Everything we do, not everything, almost we do some things mindlessly or accidentally, but most of our actions are intentional. So we can say that all intentional behavior is driven by what? The answer in Bhagavad Gita and elsewhere is raga dosha, as you correctly said. So we have certain compulsions to get what we want, compulsions to get away from what we don't want. Shri Krishna says, na karomiti. I says, I don't do anything at all. Well, Shri Krishna has no raga dvesha. So not driven by this compulsion to get what you want, not driven by a compulsion to go away from what you don't want. So Shri Krishna says, I don't do anything at all. Then the verse that Krishna quotes is a verse about Sri Krishna, Ishvara really, as karma paladata, the giver of the results of actions. And I think the question is, when Ishvara gives you the results of your deeds, isn't that an action? So suppose you do a good deed, and Sri Krishna gives you, Ishvara. Ishvara gives you a blessing. Suppose you do something harmful, and Ishvara makes you suffer as a result. So then you might think, well, isn't that action? Sri Krishna says, na karomi iti, I don't do anything at all. So if Ishvara is up, I'm being facetious now, if Ishvara is up there, I use that nice Hindi word, uparwala. Some Hindi cracks me up. So uparwala means the one who dwells up there. So anyway. Is Krishna the uparwala, the other one, Malik? Interesting that these are more Urdu words, right? They're used in both a purely Hindustani context and an Urdu context, but they seem to be more Urdu or Malik is definitely of Persian origin, I suppose, or Arabic origin. Even that wala affix is also not Sanskritic. Any word that ends with wala is evidence of Urdu. It's not from the Sanskrit. Anyway, I'm off on a tangent. So Sri Krishna says, I don't do anything at all, yet Ishvara is the one who administers blessings and the opposite. So isn't that doing something? Well, we just discussed before that an action, an intentional action, has to be driven by raga dvesha. Ishvara has no raga dvesha. Sri Krishna has no raga dvesha. So if Ishvara doesn't have raga dvesha, when you get a blessing, let me try to put it in different words. If you do something good, an act of dharma, does Ishvara have any choice in giving you a blessing or giving you a so-called curse? No, choiceless. It happens naturally, spontaneously. It's not willful behavior. Ishvara has no will in the human sense of the word will. Will means choice. Ishvara has a will. This won't make any sense. Choiceless will? What in the world can that possibly mean? Here's what it means. Ishvara created the world with its internal laws of nature, including laws of karma. Those laws of nature are, figuratively speaking, Ishvara's will. I find this a really, really helpful metaphor. Just a metaphor. Ishvara is not a human being, so don't think of Ishvara as having a human kind of will. Ishvara doesn't look down upon us and say, who should I bless and who should I not bless? That's silliness, childish, really. But rather, Ishvara created the world with its laws of nature, with its laws of karma, and according to the laws of karma and laws of nature, whatever happens, happens according to those laws. Those laws, in my view, are a great way to understand Ishvara's will. But here's the point. You can change your mind about what you're going to do. You can choose to come to class on a Sunday morning. You can choose not to. Or you can drive halfway and change your mind. It happens. I don't know if it happened, but anyway, it could happen. So here's the point. Does Ishvara change his mind? And I've given this example before. If I drop this, it falls according to the laws of nature. Can Ishvara change his mind about this and say, let it fall sideways? Not going to happen, right? Laws of nature are consistent. So Ishvara's will, expressed as the laws of nature, are constant, unlike human will, which is fickle. Human will is notoriously fickle. Ishvara is utterly unlike that. Okay, another question here. This from Vaidya. Oh, good question. I have a question about Atma as witness or sakshi, described in Vedantic scriptures. There's nothing other than Brahman or Atma in the final analysis, so what is there for Brahman to witness? Nothing. From the standpoint of Brahman, there's only Brahman. There's nothing. Advaya. There's no second thing. If there's only Brahman and there's no second thing, then what is there to be witnessed? Nothing. So what is there for Brahman to witness? Nothing. Of course, then you say, but why then does the teachings of Vedanta talk about witness? Are the teachings of Vedanta meant for Brahman? You get the point. The teachings of Vedanta are not meant for Brahman, they're meant for us. We live in a world of duality. We live in a world where there is a difference between observer and observed. So the teachings of Vedanta address us at our own level. The teachings of Vedanta address us at the level of duality. So she concludes, am I correct in saying that witness is just a method to point to Brahman or Atman? I wouldn't say just. The teachings of Vedanta are a brilliant methodology to lead you to discover the truth of who you are. Okay, can we take another question here?
Namaste, Swamiji. My question has to do with the fact that so many of us living in today's world are addicted to knowledge, which satisfies the mind. We learn more and more, we ask more and more. But knowing more doesn't necessarily stop suffering. or change us into better human beings.
Correct.
So how do we achieve a balance?
Balance between?
Between knowing and becoming a better human. Just knowing something doesn't help us become better or doesn't stop us from suffering. It can just be at a mental level that we understand something.
But balance, I'm not sure why do you use the word balance? That's not clear.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is this need to know more and more, understand more and more. What does that lead to? I'm not sure. How does that make us better?
It may or may not. I'm still not getting your question.
So when we are pursuing learning, we ask questions, we dive deeper into the subject we are learning, whether it's Vedanta or anything else.
Okay. I'd like to stop you there and say this discussion about seeking knowledge Vedanta is not seeking knowledge. Sounds unusual? If you want to learn about computers, because that's a valuable skill, excellent. If you want to learn about anything in the world, because either it's a valuable skill or, as you said, it's interesting, go for it. If you enjoy the study, some people enjoy studying all kinds of obscure topics because they enjoy it, and why not? Who should say don't do it? If you find it enjoyable, do it. If you take that same line of thought to Vedanta, it's a blunder. Because in Vedanta, if you're seeking knowledge for a skill, or if you're seeking knowledge for enjoyment, those are ordinary worldly things, and nothing wrong in it. But if you ask, how does it lead to improvement? May or may not. Skill may improve your life, but if you want to study butterflies because you find them fascinating, that probably won't improve the nature of your life. Here's the problem. If we study Vedanta because we think it's interesting, I'm sorry, I'm going to sound a little harsh. If you study Vedanta because it's interesting, you're wasting your time. Sorry to sound harsh, but that's the reality of it. And it's also true that many people study Vedanta because they find it interesting. And when I say interesting, maybe I was overly harsh. So I said, if you study butterflies because they're interesting, no harm. If you study Vedanta because it's interesting, no harm. Also, no moksha. That orientation of studying Vedanta because it's interesting is an orientation that will never lead to moksha. Even that I have to catch myself. If it remains at that level, it will never lead to moksha. On the other hand, I just caught myself, and I'm glad that happened. Notice I said, I'm glad that happened. Now, this is a complete aside. We talked about willful control. Am I in control of the next thought to come into my mind? So I said something, and then I corrected myself. Who is that I who's correcting myself? Sorry to go off on this tangent, but I think it ties into some of our earlier. This is the wisdom of Vedanta through my guru, through Ishvara's blessing. It's all back here. And that's the one who's in control, not the Swami. And if you find these teachings attractive, I think it's not because of the Swami, it's because of where all of it comes from. It comes from my guru, comes from this tradition, comes from Ishvara, ultimately. Anyway, so because of that, I said something. What did I say? If you're if you're studying Vedanta merely because it's interesting, I said it will never lead to moksha, and then something clicked. Not willfully, something clicked and said, wait a minute, that's not right. Nor is it helpful to say that. Because if you start off on the wrong foot, you may correct yourself after a while. That is, initially, Vedanta may seem interesting, and then after you get into it for a while, you say, oh, this Vedanta is much more than I thought it was. This Vedanta is a solution to the problem of suffering. Now, that may not have started your process. So you may have started studying Vedanta because you found it interesting. But as you get deeper and deeper into it, you may discover that, oh, it's much more than a merely interesting subject matter. This is indeed a solution to the problem of suffering. I'll give another example. I've lived in ashrams most of my adult life and had a chance to observe others who come and live in ashrams. Many people will come and live in an ashram for the wrong reasons. So ashram is a place where the very meaning of the word shram, many of you know as work. So in this case, spiritual work, spiritual effort. And ashram is a place where you come to do spiritual work, sadhana. That's the literal meaning of an ashrama. But some people will come to an ashram for the wrong reason, and that is as an escape, right? Something bad has happened to them, some emotional turmoil, and they just got to get away from it, and they hide out and run away. So they run away to the ashram. So they come to the ashram for the wrong purpose. I've observed this. I've also observed that some of those people, after being in an ashram for a while, get the idea of what they're supposed to be doing. And their thinking gets modified. Even though they came for the wrong reason, they're now continuing to stay in that ashram for the right reason, for the sake of spiritual practice and spiritual growth. This is an interesting phenomenon that says we may start off on the wrong foot, but it may have a good consequence in the long run. In logic, they call this samvadi brahma, an error which has a good consequence. And the example they give is you see a piece of shell, shiny shell on the sand, on the beach. You bend down to pick up that piece of shell and you discover it's a coin. You made an error, but the error has a good consequence. So the point here then is you may be attracted to Advaita Vedanta because it's interesting. That's an error which can have a good consequence. You may come to Vedanta because of emotional problems, like the person who comes to an ashram. That's okay. It can turn out to have a good consequence. Of course, may not have a good consequence. There's no guarantee. But even if you come for the right reason, there's no guarantee. You know, if you say, Swamiji, is there a guarantee that I'll get enlightened through these teachings? Give me a break. There's no guarantee. It's up to you, not up to me, not up to the... There's no question about the validity and power of these teachings. And it's likely that there's no question about my ability to convey it. But it's up to you. It's not up to the teachings, and it's not up to me. It's up to you. It's up to you to listen with the proper mind, with a prepared mind, and it's up to you to make the discovery. No one can make you enlightened. You have to make the discovery. The truth you seek We'll end with this observation, I think. The truth you seek is already here now. The truth you seek is, suppose you say, I'm seeking Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna already dwells within you, but you don't. The presence of that divinity within you is covered by a so-called veil of ignorance. What is required to remove that veil of ignorance? We need these teachings, we need a teacher, but there's one more factor. And that factor is you. No matter how good the teachings and teacher is, it's up to you, ultimately, to recognize the truth, to remove that so-called veil of ignorance and discover, I am that. That's how Advaita Vedanta works. Any follow-on to your question? Okay. It was a good place to conclude our session today. We'll finish with our prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschad Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat. See you.